Hey guys, how's it going? It's Mr. Sanchez here coming at you guys with another lesson. Today we're going to do a lesson 9-14 Algebra 1. That is, we're going to focus on what's called slope. All right, our learning targets for today are to determine the slope of a line from a graph, right? That's this part right here. But we also want to know how to develop and use the formula for slope. All right, but before we even begin any of that, we're gonna want to go over the definition. What is slope? Some of you guys are probably wondering, Mister, I've never heard that word before. What is it? You keep talking about it. All right, so slope is a measurement of the amount of decline or incline of a line. All right, so and then the variable m is often used to represent the slope. So what does that mean? That means usually we have a graph, right, and then we have a line. We're trying to figure out the steepness of the line, like how many steps over and stuff like that. So that's what slope is, okay? Um, Slope is often, you can usually calculate slope by doing what's called dividing the vertical change over the horizontal change, or as we like to say, the change in y over the change in x, or the same, or delta y over delta x. All of this is going to be the same exact thing. Another thing you might hear us say is going to be the terms rise over run. Okay, and we're gonna go over that in just a bit. Okay, but this is the basics of it, and we do have a formula to calculate slope if we're given points. Okay, so the slope formula is this. Um, yeah, so the slope formula is gonna be this. M, which we usually, like we said here, is usually represents slope, is going to be equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We're going to go over what x2 and what x1 are, as well as y2, y1 are later on. But first, we're going to look at how to find our first learning target, which is determine the slope of the line from a graph, okay? So that's the first one we're going to do. And we're going to be using this definition of slope, right? Vertical change over horizontal change. All right, so this is example run, right? And I'm gonna write down right here, right? So we want slope is gonna be the same thing as the change in y. So your vertical change over your change in x. All right, so to determine all of this, to determine all of this, usually they give you a graph just like this, and you're gonna have to find the slope from this graph. First things first, what you want to do is find wherever wherever this line, um, you want to find 2 points wherever this line touches, um, exactly between like that, like a crosshair, right? So we got to find two of those points. And if you look here, if you zoom in, right here, it crosses, right? So we're gonna use this as our point, and we know this, and this point is gonna be called, so it's 0, our x is 0, and our y is gonna be -1, -2, -3. So 0, -3, right? And now you're gonna find the second point, and the second point has to cross perfectly again, and you can find one right here, right? And this point's gonna be 7 for our x value and 0 for our y value. Right, so we find 2 points, and now what we want to do is find our vertical change. So what is our vertical change? We want to know how many steps up do we have to take to find here. So we're gonna travel steps, right? So we're gonna rise up, right? Rise, which is the same thing as our change in y, or our vertical change. We're just gonna count steps to get on the same line as this, right? So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3. So our rise or vertical or change in y is going to be +3. Okay. Next up, we're going to want to find our change in x, right? So that's what we call our run, right? And we want to see how many steps we have to go from this side to get here, right? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our run is 7. Okay. So our change in x is 7. Our change in y is 7, right? And we usually refer to slope as m, right? So our m is gonna be rise over run. So in this case, what's our rise? Our rise is going to be 3 because we went 3 spaces up, right? So our rise is going to be 3. And our run is going to go when we go sideways, right? And we took how many steps? 7. So in this case, our slope is 3 over 7. So that means it's a very mellow incline. It's not going to go up really fast. So yeah, that's basically how you find the slope of this equation, right? So our change in y, once again, is going to be our rise, which is 3. And then we can write that here, I guess. So change in y is equal to 3. And our change in x is equal to 7. All right. Some of you guys might be wondering, well, what does this symbol mean, right? This triangle y is called delta y. Delta y, which is another way of saying change in y. And delta x, right? So this triangle x is called delta x. And this is basically change in y. And this is change in x. Okay, that's all it is. Nothing too crazy, right? So this is just our first example though. So we have another example and I want you guys to try this one out and we're gonna do it together as well. So, oops, here it is. Example 2, it says determine the slope of this given line. So take a moment, look at it, try and solve it if you can without my help. You can always just pause the video here or you can just follow along, right? So first we gotta find 2 points. All right, we're cross this perfectly. I see one right here where it crosses perfectly, and you got to find another one. And the other one I found was right here at 1, 1, right? So we want to find our slope. Remember, slope is the same thing as our delta y over delta x, which is just a fancy way of saying our change in y over our change in x. Okay, and if you've heard of this, it's the same thing as saying our rise over our run. So how many steps up do we have to go from 1 to get to the same line as this point, right? So let's find out. We're going to go 1, 2, right? So our rise is 2. Now to find out how many steps we have to get from here to here, right? So that's going to be 1. So our run is 1. So our slope here, our slope is going to equal to rise over run. So rise over run, right? That means we're going to get our rise is 2 and our run is 1. But what's 2 divided by 1? That's just 2. So our slope, which we refer to as m, is 2. Right? And if you see here, the next point right here, it's the same thing. It's go 1, 2 over 1. 1, 2 over 1. That's basically our slope. All right, it's pretty simple, right? You guys think you can handle this? All right. I think it's pretty simple too. And this is how you can find the slope, but when you're given a line, and that's it. All right. The other type of slope problems we're gonna have are problems like this. It says where it tells us use the slope formula to determine the slope of a line that passes through these points. All right. So I'm gonna work on this problem right over here on the bottom, just because I don't have enough room. So let's see. I'm gonna rewrite the points, right? So we're gonna call 4, 9. We're gonna call this point 1, and we're gonna call -8, -6. We're gonna call this point 2. Okay. Because this is point 1 and point 2, this is gonna be x, and this is y. This is x. This is y. However, because this is the x value of point 1, you're gonna put x1, and because this is the y value of point 1, you're gonna put y1. And similarly, because this is the x value of the second point, you're gonna write x2, and because this is the y value of the second point, you're gonna write y2. These are subscripts, and it just helps us distinguish between different variables, right? If we're using the same letter, and be like x1 is 0.1, x2 is 0.2, right? Next, you want to remember the slope formula. Slope formula is the following. Okay, it's the following. We're gonna have m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. So now all we have to do is plug in the values here. Okay. What's y? What is x y2? Right. Y2. That's gonna be this one right here. So we're gonna plug in. We're gonna write -6. Remember, whenever we have negatives, we want to put we have to put parentheses around them, right? And then this minus sign is right here, so we're just gonna keep our minus sign. And now we want to find our y1, and remember our y1 corresponds to the y value of the first point. So we're just gonna write that down, right? And what's our first point? That's gonna be 9, right? Then we're gonna draw your little graph, the little line under for division. And we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing. Next up, we're gonna find the y value. Oops, we're gonna find the x2. X2 is -8. Remember, every time we have negative, you wanna write parentheses around it, right? So we're gonna have -8. And then you're gonna notice the minus part is part of the equation, so we're gonna carry that over. And now we gotta find our x1, which is right here, which is 4. So we're just gonna write that down, 4, right? -4. Next comes the easy part. We're just gonna have to add and subtract, right? So what's -6 minus 9? That's the same thing as adding. So we're gonna have -15 on the top, and on the bottom, -8 minus 4. That's also like adding, which is -12. Now you can leave your answer like this, but I want you guys to practice and try and simplify. What number divides both 15 and -12? That's going to be the number 3. So we can divide the top and bottom by 3. And that's going to give us 5/4, right? Another thing I want you to know, negative divided by negative, that's going to turn these into positive. So we do not have to simplify. We do not have to keep writing negative signs. So our answer is going to be 5/4. However, if you let this as your answer, that would have been perfectly fine if you had -15 or -12. I won't take away points. Just keep in mind, if a question says simplify, you want to simplify, right? If you want to simplify, you got over here, right? Simplify. All right. Some teachers might care about that. Me personally, I won't. All right. So this was example number 3. All right. Now let's try example number 4, right? Example 4, we're going to call point 1 is going to now be -5 and -3, right? That comes from right here. And it's the same thing. Determine the slope. -5, -3. And point 2 is going to be 9, -10. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this problem, right? So x1 is going to be -5. y1 is going to be -3. And x2 is going to be 9. y2 is going to be -10, right? I just rewrote this, because this is x1, y1, x2, y2. Right. Now we're going to do the same thing as we did in the previous problem. We're going to write our slope formula. We're going to write m is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right. So what is that going to equal to? What is our y2? Our y2 is -10, and because it's negative, you always want to put parentheses around it. Next part, we're going to bring minus, and that comes from the equation. And then we're going to do minus our y1. What's our y1? -3. So we got to put parentheses around that number as well. On the bottom, we're going to have x2, which is 9. So we can just write that like that. Minus, because that's part of the equation or the formula. And x1, we're going to put as -5. So we're going to put that in parentheses. All right, next, all you got to do is evaluate. As we're evaluating, what's -10 minus -3? That's going to be the same thing as plus. So -10 plus 3, that's going to be -7. And then on the bottom, 9 minus a plus negative, that's going to be plus. So what's 9 plus 5? That's going to be 14. And we can actually simplify this, right? Divide both top and bottom by 7, right? And you're going to get negative 1 and then over 2. So negative 1/2. And that's our slope. All right. And make sure if you have any questions to let me know. We will be discussing some specific cases for slope later on in class. Other than that, guys, that's it. Make sure you copy this down. And I'll see you guys in class if you have any questions. Goodbye.